Coming up on Maine Challenge, the three Democratic candidates for House District 90. Hello and welcome to Maine Challenge. Today we have three Democratic candidates for the House District 90. That includes the towns of Bremen, Bristol, Damascotta, Newcastle, Monhegan, and parts of Nobleboro, South Bristol, and Louds Island. We'd like to welcome David Levesque, Wendy Pay, and Lydia Crafts. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here, and we're going to do an hour show today, and we're going to try to get a little bit underneath some of the issues and help the voters decide which of you three outstanding candidates will be the nominee for House District 90. First of all, if you would, starting with you, David, if you would tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, your work, your current employment situation, and any previous public service.
Sure. I guess what I will do is start by saying I grew up in Hancock County in a commercial fishing family. I'm Maine educated, having attended public schools and universities in Maine. I've been a resident of Newcastle for 20 years. I practice law out of my office on Main Street in Damascotta and manage 2 associate attorneys and a legal assistant. Over my 23 years of practice in law, I've used my professional advocacy skills to help my clients solve problems and resolve disputes. I've served on and taken leadership positions on many local, state, and national boards and committees. I'm running because I want to use my professional advocacy skills and leadership skills to address the healthcare crisis, the climate crisis, and the erosion of educational opportunities in Maine. So.
Very good. Thank you. Wendy Pay, I know that you've served in the legislature because we served there together, as I recall, for a term or two.
Yeah, yes, we did.
Tell us about why you're coming back for more.
All right. Like David, I'll fill you in a little bit. I was actually born in Ohio. My family moved to Alabama, where I learned what racism really means. And then we moved to Minnesota, where my family founded an Outward Bound school. And then I went to Africa, Southern Africa, where I actually ran an Outward Bound program that was working toward the end of apartheid. I will say that throughout my professional life, I have been working with people. That is what I have done, whether it's in a wilderness setting, in a canoe trip, or whether it's an urban setting like in Calgary, Alberta, or if it's in my own community of Bremen, or at a state level here in Maine. And I really believe in different perspectives. I believe that people can come together and different perspectives make a sounder product in the end. I like people, and I think that it's important to listen to everyone and then to get it together. And over those years, I've gotten pretty good at that. And that's why I'm wanting to go back. Mick Devon was holding this seat, and he's term limited. So I am running for an open seat because I want to do the same thing I've done before, and I was very effective at it. Thanks.
Well, thank you. That's great. And Lydia Crafts, also from Newcastle.
Yes.
Tell us about yourself.
Yes, thank you, Chuck. Thanks for having us here today. I grew up in Belfast. I now live in Newcastle with my family. I received my Master's of Social Work from the University of Maine at Orono, and I now work as a clinical social worker. I'm a program director for a special education and behavior program at the Bristol School. We serve 4 of the local school populations here in AOS 93. I chose to run, and I'm running today because I really believe in a leadership that brings the greatest number of voices together. And I've worked hard in the last 10 years building relationships right here in our district. And I continue to work and plan to work on building relationships in Augusta as a representative, whether it's fully funding public education, fighting for a just economic recovery from this pandemic, or pushing for increasing performance standards in renewable energy, my priorities and my focus will be on strengthening our economy, our public education, and our natural environment right here in Maine.
Great. Thank you very much. What in your background, and this goes for each of you, and we'll start with Wendy, what in your background and work history leads you to seek a job with very low pay and 10,000 demanding bosses sending you mixed signals?
I think I must thrive on conflict. I think that what I have found is that when people do have different opinions, you get stronger outcomes. And so at a community level, I've worked very hard as a selectman. I'm now chair of the selectmen when we've been changing things like a land use ordinance or a shoreland zone ordinance, where people are really heated up, and getting them to express their opinion and moving forward with that has been something I've been really good at. And when I was in the legislature, I would be asked by leadership to help bring people together. I ran what we had, our rural caucus. I don't know exactly how I ended up leading it, but I did. And we were able to work hard enough and together that we were able to keep the autonomy for our small school districts in the state, which was really important to us. It didn't matter to us that Chicago had one superintendent, we were different. And I think that it's my listening ability and my ability to help people that are angry get beyond that anger into the fear. And I think that we just really need that right now. And I can hit the ground running.
Leah.
Yeah, well, for anyone else who's worked in public education, we know about low pay, multiple bosses, and demanding jobs. So, as a working parent in our district, I have the opportunity, which I think is unique. We have a citizens legislature that does not pay a livable wage, ironically, but I have a school board and a building principal and a superintendent who really support having a voice from public education, from our local community in Augusta. And I feel that privilege and that opportunity is important right now. I have that direct experience right in our community, working with children and families, understanding the struggle of raising higher costs of childcare, what it's like to juggle two working parents. And so I think that I have this unique opportunity, and I think that it's important for the legislature to be made up of a true representation of our citizenship, and that young working parents don't often have that opportunity. And so I feel privileged and excited to be able to be that voice.
Good point. David. By the way, before you start, we are trying to do the 2-minute limit, and I appreciate you to be fairly natural. I'm not natural at being a timekeeper, but I appreciate that, and I just wanted to let each of you know and the audience know that that's how we're working on a 2-minute cycle for most answers. David.
Sure. Well, what really motivates me in my background is the fact that growing up, we've had to take advantage of the social safety net. And I was the first one in my family to go to college. So the opportunity that Maine taxpayers has provided to me by providing me that opportunity and the education I received. And I have a rewarding career now, and I'm at a point where I can take that lower paying job and give back to my community as it has given to me. And I believe that I'll be effective at it based on my professional experience and my leadership experiences as well. So those are really, it's the opportunity that was afforded to me. I want to make sure that all Mainers have that opportunity and stay in Maine like I was able to do and have a career, but also give back as well. And this really is my opportunity to put the taxpayers' investment in me back to the taxpayers as their return on the investment.
Very good, thank you. Well, I think we're ready for the lightning round. If you are, you're all grounded, so I think we're safe in that regard. I'm going to just raise a number of interesting issues that are relevant today, and especially today, and then I'd like a short, concise answer about where you come down on it. I understand and I think some of the audience understands that it's not always black and white in on a legislative vote, but it's good to know where you stand on some of these critical issues of our time. So we'll get right into healthcare, and if you would like to give a thought or an opinion on Medicare for all, universal healthcare, single payer, that kind of thing, we'll start with you, Lydia.
Great, thank you. So I think it's undoubtedly true that healthcare in this country and specifically in this state is in a crisis, that we struggle with the increasing costs of health insurance. We struggle with the cost of prescription drugs and co-pays. We see hospitals struggling to balance, right, the increasing costs with also the difficult cost of providing healthcare in rural communities. I think that healthcare is a human right. We all deserve it. I think there's a significant problem with linking healthcare and coverage to employment. We see that right now during this pandemic with the loss of jobs and the loss of healthcare coverage for Mainers. It's unacceptable. And we know that the cost long-term on our society is greater when people do not have the ability to access healthcare early on, right? Primary care and basic needs, preventative measures. So I fully support healthcare accessibility and a Medicare for all model. I think it's a complicated issue. I will acknowledge I am not a healthcare expert, but I think that the state needs to continue to talk about what it looks like, especially with our demographics, right? That people are able to live in rural coastal communities like ours with great medical care and age in place, but that's not always true. And with the crumbling of rural hospitals, we see that challenge increasing as we move to the future. So I think it needs to be at the top priority. And Governor Mills has brought that up in the legislature just this past January, and I think we need to continue to address it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia Crafts. David.
So I would echo everything Lydia said, but I'll add that I am for universal health care. To me, the biggest crisis that we face as Mainers and as a nation is the healthcare crisis. Just imagine, if you will, if Maine could figure out how to provide health care to all of its citizens, how many young people would move here and start new businesses, and how many entrepreneurs would step out and start their own businesses, not worrying about having health care coverage. That's really the best thing that we could do from the state of Maine if we cannot get the federal government to do it collectively. We have to figure out a way to do it regionally or statewide. We just need to agree that, first of all, and I can't imagine we couldn't, is that we have a crisis and everybody needs the healthcare, quality healthcare when they need it.
Thank you, David Levesque. Wendy Pay.
Thank you. It's amazing to me that we don't have healthcare for everybody. It just, most countries in the world have it. And we have things like, we can't negotiate at a federal level. Medicare can't negotiate prescription prices, and that just doesn't make any sense. I lived in Canada for 20 years. I never thought about healthcare. I was pretty healthy. I wasn't often at a doctor, but it wasn't an issue. And I was in Alberta, I was billed based on my income tax from the year before. A certain amount a month was just taken out. And that was really fair for me. It was affordable, and I had the health care. We're really lucky here in Maine with Janet Mills, because as governor, she has expanded Medicare for, I think, 70,000 more people. And I think that that can be happening, and it's really important. I think picking one or the other, I think I've kind of always been for single payer, that Bill Clinton tried to get through, and Hillary Clinton did her amazing job after getting something together for healthcare. But I don't feel like I have the answer either to what is going to work very, very best for the United States, because we're very individualistic and very proud of our rights and don't want to be told what we have to do. But I think we're going to have to cough up some more money to help our country in a lot of different ways.
Thank you. Next question, I guess we start with David. Am I right? I'm sorry, I want to be fair here. And this question has to do with our COVID-19 crisis. If you were suddenly put in charge of Maine's response to the COVID-19 virus, how would you balance the need to reopen business while carefully protecting the population that is at risk? Starting with David.
Well, it's hard to answer that question without knowing the resources available that Governor Mills has with her. I believe she's doing a terrific job managing the crisis with what she has. Certainly, you know, if I was in that position, I would be focusing first on safety and the health of the state first and foremost. And as we have with the sort of the shutdown, the protection stay-at-home orders for a few months, to me, that all made sense. And now slowly coming back to work makes sense to me as well. So I would have hoped that I would have made the same decisions that Governor Mills has been making. She has had the advice of the Maine CDC with Dr. Shah and has used that expert information to inform her decisions. And I think that is very well done. And I would certainly seek out similarly the advice of the experts on that.
Thank you, David. Wendy.
I think that it is hard. You know, we're kind of between a rock and a hard place on this because we want to protect the state and keep it safe. And at the same time, we're killing some of our small businesses in particular because they can't run their businesses. A friend of mine has an inn and she doesn't know if she'll be able to pay her mortgage. She doesn't know if she'll even own the building by the time that things change. And I think that I can't fault the governor or Laura Fortman, the Commissioner of Labor, for working as hard as they possibly can and doing an incredible job of trying to find balance. I know when the governor said that restaurants are going to be able to open in the 3 counties and then had to back it off, the government picked up the cost of the food that people had bought. So I can't say what they could have done better. I think federally we're in a mess. It's expanding in different states. The thing that annoys me is that I go out and I know I'm supposed to wear a mask and I know it protects you and it protects me some. So many people aren't wearing them and they're not doing social distancing as we open up. If people would do that, it would really help. There are a lot of people coming in from out of state that get in their little house and they say, well, I got to go get groceries. And so they're not doing the quarantine thing. And I wish that there was some way to make that balance happen. And I think the testing is probably the answer. Making sure people don't have it, but you might have it tomorrow. So it's kind of a mess. That's a really good answer. And I think people are trying really, really hard at a top level, at least in the state, to help us.
Commissioner Crafts.
This is a great question, Chuck, because I think that balance that you talked about, that balance of economic survival and public health, is a very fine balance to reach. I think, firstly, evidence-based, data-driven decision-making is of utmost priority for me as a representative, knowing that there's information backing up the decisions that we're making as leaders, that our communities rely on us to have that information and to be informed of the matters. I also think that, you know, from the economic standpoint, we have to understand that these are people's lives, that the housing displacements, evictions, vehicle repossessions, that these affect us in our daily living right here in our community. So I think that staying focused on making sure we have accurate data to inform our decisions and also making that human connection. And I think one of the ways we see our state government doing that right now is with Governor Mills' recovery collaboration or committee. 37 community leaders from labor, finance, the public and private sectors coming together to talk about what recovery looks like. And we see that flexibility and that creative ingenuity when it comes to shifting from statewide decision-making to county by county decisions. When there's a county that's had a much lower effect, can we reopen businesses at a faster speed? And we've seen that work. And the rates of COVID-19 continue to decrease. I think 9 yesterday, the first single digit in a couple of months. So while those are still active cases, I'm grateful to see that those numbers are decreasing. So I think that there's that balance of the human needs, the data-driven decision-making, and then that creative flexibility, that there has to be, there's no mold for this, right? We've never been in this position leading up to today. So moving forward, we're going to be making decisions unlike any of us have likely made. And I think that we can do that with some solid, safe decisions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you all so far. We're doing fine on time, and I am glad that I'm not a resident of District 90 because I would have a very hard time deciding which of you should represent me in Augusta. You're all three very capable and good candidates, and the citizens of District 90 are lucky to have you. Next question has to do with climate, and we'll start with Wendy. Crisis or liberal hoax?
Crisis. That's a really hard one to answer. It really is amazing. One thing that's amazing is that in the pandemic, it's gotten better as far as the global warming goes, not the warming itself, but as far as what we're producing that's making things really bad. And I'm hoping that we learn a lot. My husband just spent I don't know how long digging up our lawn to plant a garden. And I hope that people do that. I hope that as individuals, I think that we could do a lot more to bring things together. We need to rejoin the climate accord. I mean, I can't quite believe that all the hard work that went into doing that has slipped. And I think it's going to fall on individuals as well as the organizations and the countries to bring things together because, I need to stop buying bottled water. Get one bottle and fill it at home and take it with me. Those are kinds of things. And recycling has become a problem because China closed its doors to us, partly because we were sending them dirty trash. But what amazed me was that we were paying to ship all those containers across the ocean, making things not so good for folks that live down there under the water, all the fish and the whales. And so why can't we do that here? Let's build some recycling here. Let's put money into having our own responsibility for what we produce and help countries that are not so advantaged as us be able to move beyond climate change. I know China's a big example of, someone we compete against, but they in the mountains of China, you will find little solar mills running solar electricity running whole towns, running their water, their electricity. And why can't we be doing more of that? And we just seem to kind of, it's not really there. And we know it's there. And even people that say it's not there know it's there. So I think we have to be willing to make tough decisions and move forward without the endorsement of everybody.
Thank you, Wendy. Lydia Crafts.
Yes, certainly the climate change is a crisis that we face. I don't think that it's a partisan issue, and there's plenty of scientific data to back it. One example is my husband, Kevin, is a science teacher down at the Bristol School, and he's been teaching there for 20 years. So on a fishing peninsula, lots of young people, primarily young boys growing up in fishing families, have come through his classroom saying that they don't necessarily need a lengthy education, that they don't plan to pursue college, that they already have a business plan, that they're going to fish like their fathers and grandfathers, and that science, that science education, they already have their boat. They've already got a license. They're ready to go. And this year, for the first time in 20 years, a young student said to Kevin, my husband, he didn't know if he would be able to continue to fish, that he didn't know if he would carry on his father's legacy because of the changing waters and fish populations, ocean acidification, all of the symptoms of the greater climate change crisis. So it's not a partisan issue. It's across our community. We feel it directly right here. And I think that one of the unique opportunities we have in discussing climate change and creating legislation is the incredible youth voice that's arisen out of basically our inaction, right? The older generation's inaction to address this crisis has created this vacuum and this space for youth voices to rise up. And we see it at Lincoln Academy and the Climate Action Club. Riley Stevenson is an incredible leader at a young age, speaking up and saying, this is our future. This is what our land and community will look like. We care about it, and you as leaders need to care about it too. And so I think that's one of those examples of those voices that are out there that aren't necessarily in positions of leadership, in decision-making platforms, and we need to lift those voices up. And I think that the climate climate crisis is a perfect opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia Crafts. David, don't turn around too quickly, but right behind you, there's an ocean. I don't know if that affects your answer on this, but once again, climate, hoax or crisis?
So the science and the data is clear. It is a crisis, and I am just baffled by the people who deny it. It just doesn't make sense to me by any means. And yeah, you see the ocean here, we have mountains, we have it all in Maine. We need to preserve that. So in that vein, I support the Green New Deal. If I have the pleasure of getting to representing the district in Augusta, I would pursue litigation, if necessary. Legislation to enact the things to meet the goals of the Green New Deal. I also believe we should have a green amendment. Now, Pennsylvania and Montana are ahead of us on that, and New York is one vote away from approving that as well. And we really should make it a constitutional right to have clean water, breathe clean air, and have a healthy environment. So this is a huge issue for me, and yes, the photos hopefully expresses my love of the environment. I too grew up in a commercial fishing family, and unfortunately things have changed over the years because of our treating of the environment, and I believe that we need to address it now.
Understand. Thank you. Just a real quick answer from Wendy and Lydia, if I might. Next question was going to deal with the Green New Deal, and since David already covered that, I would ask the other two either a yay or a nay on what you know to be the Green New Deal as it's been proposed. Wendy.
Yay.
Yay. And Lydia.
Yay. I've been impressed by Representative Chloe Maxman's legislation and legislative activity here in Maine in her first term. I think that combining jobs and apprenticeship programs, looking at decreasing our reliance on fossil fuels, building our economy around a sustainable future has to be a priority moving forward.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to change the topic just a little bit to a more local issue with a different twist on it. Do you support or oppose the corridor in which power will be sent through Maine to Massachusetts? Start with Lydia.
I don't support the CMP corridor, but I also think that my voice is less important than the voices of the communities who will be directly affected by that. We hear time and time again that small rural communities are opposing this transmission line coming through. I think there are a couple of challenges and that back up my assertions that one, a neutral environmental study impact has not been conducted. And I think that that's poor decision making to do that prior to a full environmental study. And secondly, I would say that the CMP corridor is going to take our attention away from the much needed infrastructure upgrades to our current system to look at renewable energy and alternative sources moving forward. That there's lots of work to do, and I'm not opposed, but I don't think that hydroelectric power coming from Canada to fuel Massachusetts needs is what's best for Maine. I think that we can put our resources, our time, and our energy into creating an infrastructure that supports alternative energies right here in Maine and will be better for our environment and economy.
Thank you, Lydia. David.
So I really need more information to actually take a position on the corridor. The reason I need to know what is the true environmental impact and savings. I know we're trading electronic production by fossil fuels with hydropower. That sounds good, but we're ripping up trees and damaging ecosystems along the way to use that power. So we have to balance that. There's a potential for green new jobs, though, to be produced but not in this state necessarily there. So it really, I'm struggling with it. I'll put it that way, because I really need more information on the effect of, and in my mind, where I would come out where is if it protects the environment and moves us towards a better use of alternative energies and gets us away from fossil fuels.
Wendy Pay, the Carter.
Excuse me, I signed the petition and I'll be voting in support of a petition that is going forward in November. Is it November or June?
I think it's in November.
Yeah. And one of the reasons is that I, for a while, lived in Montreal in my Canadian days, and the dams they're building up there to do this are destroying the native village where the Inuit are and the Northern Indians. It's really a problem, and they don't have cars, they don't have electricity, they live in a completely organic, simple world, and this isn't good for them. It really will wipe them out. They'll take away their living and where they stay. So for that reason alone, I have a problem with us in the US who are sloppy and we waste energy having energy go through Maine, through one of the most pristine and beautiful parts of Maine, to feed the South that aren't being any more responsible than anybody on the face of this earth. I think we have other ways to generate energy that doesn't have to take away people's lives and doesn't have to be so far away that the expense even of building it must be millions of dollars a day. Let's spend those on the people.
Interesting, thank you. We have some interesting, very new developments on the national scene that affect the way our local authorities are going to work. And I'm talking about police, and I'm talking about the whole concept of restorative justice. Our most recent guest was Natasha Irving, our district attorney, who is very committed to restorative justice. And I'm wondering if you could talk each a little bit, and I think is it your turn, Lydia? I think it is to start. We'll start with you talking about social justice, police, defunding police, and restorative justice. Lydia.
Yeah, so I think that's a lot to handle in 2 minutes, but I'll give it my best try, Chuck. So first, I've been a mentor with the Mid-Coast Restorative Justice Project for about 10 years, and I see that its transformative impact has a huge net positive for our communities. I've worked with adolescents coming out of the criminal justice system to repair harm, to participate in community circles where they're hearing from folks who have been directly harmed by their actions, and I've seen that changes people's lives. So on the, point one, I strongly support restorative practices. We use them in our school community, and it has a great impact on relationships between youth and teachers. I also think that, when we talk about police and prison reform and the criminal justice system, we see places like Long Creek Youth Prison not able to serve the needs of children in our communities. And one of the factors that are part of that is they don't offer mental health treatment. They don't have adequate services. And over 40% of youth in Long Creek are there because they don't have a safe place to go back into. They're torn out of their communities, they're ripped away from their families, and they don't have the community-based services they need to reintegrate. And so we're keeping them locked up in prison. So a community-based approach is going to be the best model for us to use. We see this already happening right here in Lincoln County with New Hope for Women and the Sheriff's Department. We have a domestic violence resource center that collaborates together with our police system to make sure that victims and survivors of domestic violence have an advocate reach out to them when there's been a domestic assault in our community. That's a great model of a crisis response team that really truly serves the needs of everyone involved. Police have been burdened with the requirement and the obligation to go far beyond what they're trained to do, right? When we're talking about homelessness and mental health crises and domestic violence, they have too much burden on their shoulders. And I think that we could do better to serve our community and our state by bringing in more professionals to create a richer, more vibrant community crisis response team. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. David.
Sure. Well, I really am happy to see that District Attorney Irvin is pursuing restorative justice. things, but also trying to get the Veterans Court and the Substance Abuse Court available in her prosecutory district. It seems to me rather discriminating to have those courts in Portland and Augusta, but not available to our mid-coast counties. We need to do all we can to divert people from the jails and the expense of that, and restorative justice is a great way to try that, and using the veteran court model and the substance abuse court models will help with that as well. So kudos to her, and I was glad that she was on last time and talked about those approaches to addressing some of the ills there. As far as Long Creek goes, I believe it should be closed, and that children at risk should be dealt with within their own communities. And we should invest in those type of programs that help those children succeed in life instead of putting them away down in South Portland. Thank you.
Lindy.
Thank you. I'm proud that I worked with Michael Westcott, who was a judge years ago, who started restorative justice in our area. And I really believe in it. When I lived in Alberta, one of the things I did was I ran a group home for incarcerated youth. And they sent most of them to us. We were on the Calgary, sort of just outside Calgary. They'd send them to us. We were a small farm. We had a goat dairy. And one of the things that I learned was that you have to have an inner locus of control to be able to change your behavior patterns. And these kids were invariably brought up in horrible home situations, from one watching her father kill her mother, then himself, the things that we just don't think about. And they didn't know what to do inside of themselves. But I will tell you that I couldn't get them to make their bed or do the dishes, but boy, they were up before school to go milk their goat. And they went to milk their goat because it gave them a sense of success. Goats can be very affectionate. They were safe. Each kid that came into the group home, I let them have a pet if they wanted. The kids that were the most damaged got a dog. They'd fight at school. They'd come home, get off the bus, and there would be that dog. And I'd look, and a little while later, they'd be stretched on the couch sleeping. And it really made me believe in all the things that we're talking about with restorative justice. I also spent some time at the Thomaston prison before it moved, meeting with inmates who, they said, they don't teach us anything here. The recidivism rates are around, 80% for an adult? And they said, can't they teach us something? Why are they going to build this whole new prison? And just, we don't care if, we're not the cleanest place in the world. Why don't you teach us something? They have a wonderful thing where some people learn to make furniture, but they don't get community living skills. They don't have mental health help. And they don't want to be in jail. They also didn't know that they could vote. So if you visit any prison, you'll let felons know that in Maine they can vote, and their vote counts. So I'm really a strong advocate of restorative justice, and I think our prisons, where we have more people locked up per capita than anywhere in the world, and it's not helping them, and it costs a ton of money that could be spent actually on helping them. Thank you.
When you get to the legislature, one of your first decisions will be your choice of committee. And I wonder if each of you would talk just a little bit about which committees you'd like to be on, or what your first and second choices of committee might be when you get there, starting with David.
Thank you, Chuck, for that question. To me, I've known lawyers who've served in the legislators, and it seems and they always seem to be asked to be on the Judiciary Committee. I'm going to steer away from that one because I'm sure there's other people who can serve on that. I have given testimony a number of times as the Maine State Bar Association president to the Judiciary Committee on judge renominations, yay or nays, as far as the bar's point of view, and that was a great experience. However, since I have benefited so much from the education system in Maine, I would want to serve on the Education Committee so that I can do whatever I can do to make sure that we have great education pre-K all the way up through post-secondary education system here. And I believe that we should have the best education system we can possibly provide for our students to compete in this world today. That's a global economy. And that includes, to me, post-secondary education that has free tuition. So education would be the first one. And then if I couldn't get that, judiciary makes sense, but I also do tax work in my practice, and I've worked with banks, so something with banking or taxation could be a...
Don't tell them that you are a lobsterman, because they'll put you on marine resources.
Yes, yes, I understand that.
Wendy, you were on ag?
My first year I was on Marine Resources and Health and Human Services. My second term, I was on Marine Resources and chair of the Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry Committee. And when I went back the second time, I was the chair on the Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry Committee for both of those terms. And I think, I mean, of course, what do I want? I want to go back and be a chair, a house chair, because you're part of leadership and you can impact all kinds of things. One reason that I went with committees that were, I don't know, connected to the land, conservation, fishing, was because a lot of folks that need support and representation in Augusta don't want to go there, don't have time to go there, and don't feel very articulate when they get there. And it doesn't matter how many times we would tell farmers, if you come and tell us what makes a difference, we can help it happen. And I found myself, both for the Rural Caucus and for those committees and the people that they represented, that I could be a good voice for them. And I could bring the organic and the traditional farmer together to see that if they work together, they could get a whole lot done. And the favorite committees are appropriations, taxation, education, and health and human services. And I had the choice to go on appropriations, and I said, no, I'm going to stick with the voice of my people. So that's what I made my dream. I'd go back and be chair because Greg Hickman is retiring, but I don't know if that would happen.
The speaker asked me one term if I would serve on appropriations, and my answer was, I do not want to live in a state that would put me in charge of its money.
Good for you.
Lydia, what would your first two choices of committee be?
Yes, thank you, Chuck. I think that one of the messages I hear, I've called, over 1,300 voters in the last couple of months as our campaign has shifted dramatically. And one of the things I hear is how important it is to our community that we have representation on marine resources. That, Mick Devon has done a very, very admirable and honorable job serving on that committee, and that it affects our cultural heritage. That the decisions made in that committee really come down to the decisions that are creating what our future looks like as a fishing community. So I think that would be my first priority. My second would be health and human services. I'm a mental health professional. I believe in the work that we're doing as a state to look out for those in the most vulnerable populations. But I would also point out the difficulty of committee work when we're a citizens legislature, and that some committees meet 5 days a week. And if we're expected to earn a pay of $10,000 or $12,000 a year, that goes into decisions around committees. That for folks who have the time and the privilege to serve on a committee that meets 5 days a week, that's very different for some folks. And I think that balance of finding the right committee for the right representative is really important.
Exactly right. Good point. Next question is kind of a theoretical, philosophical question more than anything else. What can we do, especially in the legislature, about the growing disparity in wealth and financial inequality among Maine citizens? I think it's your turn, Lydia. I'm sorry, I've completely lost track of this. circle, but everybody's getting a shot.
Sure. I'm happy to go first. So I think wealth inequality in our state and in our country is a huge, and I think that we would likely all agree that it's a concern when 1% of our population controls and maintains the greatest amount of wealth. I think there are several areas that we can work on addressing this. One is understanding sort of the institutions that we already have and how those shape what wealth looks like. So public education is a perfect example. We have a public education system that's designed for, I would argue, one type of learner. And as we all know, there are many types of learners across the board. And that public education, in order to be successful for all of our population, all of the Mainers right here in our state, it needs to be designed and flexible enough to meet all of our learning needs. And I think that we see some of those opportunities in vocational training. We see that in hands-on project-based learning, but it's not across the board. And I don't think that there's the expectation necessarily on public schools to always have that flexibility, because it's hard, right? The reality is teachers are overworked and underpaid, and it's a difficult job and career to take on, and we're struggling to recruit teachers. I think that UMF had one special education graduate 2 years ago from their teaching program. Like that's a crisis in our education system, and I think it needs to be our priority to look at, are we raising children to have the job skills and the training that they need when they leave to be able to access work? So that's one. The other, I would say, is supporting small business development, that we have a huge entrepreneurial spirit right here in our district, whether it's Split Rock Distillery, Mexicali Blues. We see the restaurant and tourism industry supporting our community really at our foundation. And I think that we can do more to incentivize and support small businesses to be successful. I think that the Black Lives Matter movement also is worth mentioning, because I think we have systems of institutional racism and classism right here in Maine that directly negatively affect children and young adults growing up here. And that we see incarceration rates around youth of color at 6 times their demographic makeup. So we have to look at and acknowledge that those things exist, and that wealth inequality is one of them.
Thank you, Lydia. David Levesque, your take on that.
Sure. First, I have to note that I'm the chair of the Board of Visitors of the University of Maine at Farmington, and the one graduate in special ed was for their new master's program, not for their overall undergraduate program. So I just wanted to clear the record on that one. So to me, it's the same thing. Education opportunity will help bridge that gap of the haves and have-nots. And if we can use models that, so that no student is, I don't want to say left behind, but every student is served and gets the opportunity that they need to succeed financially, and to sort of bring that gap together, we should go for that approach. We should also look at the new economy. So it comes down to, what are we going to do to compete in the future? And in my opinion, it should be jobs related to solar production and solar energy on residential homes, and creating different ways of delivering stuff that's environmentally sound, figuring out how to recycle things that we can't recycle now, and not send stuff overseas to be bought by other countries, but to put that stuff back to use somehow and figure out a way. Biomass systems and methane reclamation, all those things can create economic opportunities for people if we provide the education and training to put those folks in those type of jobs.
Thank you, David. Wendy.
I think what we've got in this country is an attitude that I've got mine, and I don't care if you've got yours. And I think that we have to wake up, and I think there are very responsible, very wealthy people that are pouring money in to try and make things better. But I know our daughter is a nurse. She has a debt from going to school. She doesn't make a lot of money as a nurse. She's got to drive to get there. She can't work at home. You know, she's entering into a very volatile environment every day. And she can't afford to fix the gutter around her roof on her house. And to me, that just, it doesn't really make common sense. Common sense is that we would have a living wage, a living income for everybody that could, so that they could get through. And they don't have it right now. And I think if you think about it, there's no kid that doesn't go to school wanting to learn. And something happens between then and when they get out of the system as a senior, or if they drop out sooner. And I think they don't, I think I've said this before, we're born conceptual, but when we get into school, it's kind of linear. It's we're going to learn to read, we're going to learn to write. Today we'll do these tables and those tables, and we're not allowed the flexibility to help kids learn, and kids get lost. And so if you don't get a good education, I think Lydia's really clear on that. If you don't get a good education in the beginning to at least become literate, it's hard to move forward. In today's technology, you're going to be a boat builder, you've got to be able to use a computer to help you do it. And I think people want to learn those things. I mean, when we first got our new TV, I had to call next door to my nephew to come and figure out how to run it. And he was like down like shot. There you go, Daddy, bye. And I was like, but what did you do? You know? And so I'm caught in that all the time now, because I'm not particularly interested, and I'm not dependent on it, except now I am, because I've got to do virtual campaigning and I don't have a clue. And I'm getting some good help to point me, no, go over there, push that one. My computer upstairs, I can't get my picture on it. So I got a friend coming over to teach me how. I think that the disparity is it's sort of agonizing to think about the wealthiest people in the world and what's happening. I will say that Bill Gates is buying these new ultrasound machines that he's spreading all over Africa, that you can get for a little small amount of money. It fits in a little suitcase, and you can get a needle in somebody or help them with all the things that an ultrasound can do. And Warren Buffett, but he's saying, why don't you tax me? And we don't do it. Even this first help we gave, I know I'm running out of time. The first help we gave, billions or millions went to the big corporations. We got to stop it.
Well, thank you. And I understand and appreciate your passion on that. We're running down to the end of the show, believe it or not. And I'd like to give each of you a minute and a half or 2 minutes to wrap up, conclude, explain to us all why you should be the first choice among 3 very strong choices. And I really appreciate you all coming on the show and helping the voters decide. It's obviously going to be a tough call for the voters of District 90. And I want to thank you again for coming on. And I'd love to hear any kind of vision that you might have or final wrap up, starting with you, Wendy.
Thank you. I know it's a hard decision. I think that we've got 3 excellent candidates, and the first time I ran, they had to beg me to run, and we were 23% Democrat, and we still prevailed. I think what I bring to it is the experience that I have, I think is really important, both at a community level as chair of the Bremen Selectmen, and also putting in 8 years, 6 of those as a chair in the legislature. Beyond that, I'm a person who has spent her whole life working in conflict and working and bringing people together. And that's a skill that it appears not too many people have a lot of. And it's my opinion and your opinion, and it's really what we can work out. And I have an ability to help people that are angry when they come into a meeting like they did at the land use ordinance when we tried to change that, waving piles of paper saying, this is a stupid blah, 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 blah. Why wasn't I invited to the meetings? Well, you were, but you didn't come. I don't say that. I say, well, tell me what needs to be different. And when that happens and people get listened to and feel like they're actually heard, they begin to open up. Because if you're planning what you're going to say back to the person who's talking, you're not going to hear what they say. And so that really is a lot of...
I have a voice in my ear that's telling me that if each of you are going to get a minute, we've got to move on. I'm sorry, Wendy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got 2 minutes.
Over to you, Lydia. Well, We've been juggling.
All right, Jeff.
Thank you, Chuck. I would just like to close by saying, you know, I live right here in District 90 and I'm raising my family. And I realize that it's difficult to make a life in a rural community. And I think that one of the ways that we can invest in our future is by legislating in a way that shows youth and children growing up right here in our community that we're investing in them and that we're investing in our environment, we're investing in our public education and in our economy, so that this place is a place that's more than just a landscape. It's a home, a place that we can thrive, and that there are barriers and challenges looking at recovering from this pandemic that are going to be difficult. And the way we're going to get through that difficulty is by building great relationships, by listening, by working hard, and by having compassion and hearing from all of us, because the way that this pandemic plays out in our future does have a direct impact on every single member of our community. So I look forward to working as a representative, and I would encourage folks to visit my website. It's lydiacrafts.com. You can find out more about issues and my campaign priorities, and follow my Community Coming Together series on Facebook Live. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lydia Crafts. David Levesque, wrapping it up.
Great. I hope that left me a minute or so. I can get things done, and I want to go to Augusta to get things done. I want to make sure that everybody has quality health care when they need it. I want to make sure that we enact legislation that puts the Green New Deal to work. I want us to pass a Green Amendment. I want everybody to be able to have a post-secondary education without incurring crushing debt. I want to be able to put my leadership and advocacy experience to work for this district, and I hope the Democratic voters for July 14 agree with me. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Thank you each very much. And especially thank you for putting yourselves out and putting yourselves forward to represent the citizens of District 90. It is a sacrifice to serve in the legislature. It's exciting, it's fun, it's a social adventure, but it's also a challenge and a real challenge to one's personal life to put yourself out there and do it. So I want to say thank you each for putting yourselves out there and being willing to do it. And again, I feel bad for the citizens of District 90 having to choose one of you, but Wendy Pay, Lydia Crafts, and David Levesque, each of you candidates for the Democratic nomination for House District 90. And thank you all for being a part of Maine Challenge, and we'll see you next time.
Show your support for Maine Challenge and LCTV's programming. We're all about community. Please go to lctv.org to make a contribution. Your support makes us stronger together.